Hi, I'm Louise Larson. I run August Consulting and I help families on the road to college, helping them sort out college admissions. This is my September webinar. I am coming to you on September 1st, right in the middle of Labor Day weekend. I am very uncut and unfiltered, but I had a little time tonight and I thought, why don't I just get this done? So here goes. News and notes for September. I'm going to talk about what's the latest little bits and pieces and then talk about loans. What do loans look like? How do they work? And so things you might want to know about that. The first little bit of news is, and I don't know why I'm laughing because it's not that funny. In the New York Times this past week or so, there was an article from the Surgeon General. Parents are at their wits' end, and basically, parenting is hazardous to your health. Maybe, I don't know, like a cigarette warning. It made me laugh because parenting is very stressful. One of the reasons it's stressful is because the day you have a baby, now you have 18 years to figure out how to pay for college, and that is stressful. So as your child is going through high school, then you have the added layer of stress around admissions. Can they get in? Will they get in? Where will they get in? How will they pay for it? So yes, one of the pieces of the stress is certainly things that I help families with. So let's kick it off. University of Virginia a while back had stopped deferring students in the early action and early decision rounds. So either it was admit, deny, or possibly a wait list. And I think they were doing this to give students more clarity of their chances. They stopped deferring. And they have now pivoted and they are going to add deferrals as an option for early action and early decision students. If you think your job is hard, there are currently 45 vice president of enrollment positions open in the country. So that means 45 schools do not have a head of admissions, or sometimes they're provost of enrollment management. They'd have different titles, but basically there's 45 open seats because these jobs are so hard. 6% of adults over 50 are still paying student loan debt. It did not break out. Is that their debt or is it parent loan debt? Wasn't clear, but 6% over 50 is a fair amount, especially if it's their undergraduate debt. The FAFSA has moved. Usually the FAFSA opens October 1st. Last year it was they were rolling out a new FAFSA, and that got pushed back to, I think it was December 31st. Right now they're saying the FAFSA has to open on December 1st. We'll wait and see. That could move again. I don't know. Interesting, in August, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo waitlist moved, which I thought was just interesting. I thought that this year might have a bigger domino effect of waitlist movement over the summer, but didn't see so much of that. There are 50 schools in this country. I was on a webinar around merit scholarships. 50 schools in this country don't give merit scholarships. So that's a pretty elite group that doesn't give any sort of merit scholarship. Kudos to the University of Utah and the Utah Direct program. They announced they're opening 5,000 like direct admit spots at the University of Utah for Utah high school students. And full disclosure, one of my kids goes to the University of Utah, but I thought that was awesome. Johns Hopkins on August 16th announced that they are going back to testing. For the class of 2026, it will be required. For the class of 25, it is preferred. I think that stinks. If you really had your heart set on Hopkins and really hadn't put time into testing, or knew you didn't have great scores, but you thought I can go there test optional, a little late in the game on August 16th to announce that. But, we can't do anything about that. They're going to do what they're going to do. What else? So if you know a senior, you might hear them talk about having to do the SRAR. And the SRAR is what it stands for is a self-reported academic record. And this is a newer thing that is taking on more and more steam each year. And basically what it is you have to go onto a platform similar to like the Common App and establish an account where you upload your transcript, basically. I mean, instead of in your school, well, you will, if you're admitted, schools do it differently. Some schools will require a transcript if you're admitted and attending. There's different ways that they're going to ask for your actual high school transcript. But for right now, instead of like their secretary uploading your information, you are going to do it. So it started more with big public schools, but some privates have added their name to the list. So if you know a senior, you might hear them saying, now I have to do my SRAR. I tell my kids not to do it till like the second week of September or like the second week of school, when you really, most kids in August know their schedule, but it still could change between when you get it and then when you walk in the door. There could be a switch based on a teacher not showing up or whatever. You could have a switch, and then you might start your classes and say, wait a minute, I've got to make a switch. So I tell my kids, don't worry about the SRAR until like the second week of school, when you know, like, okay, my schedule's good. This is what I'm going to do. So the other piece of the puzzle is portals. Now, if you are over a certain age, you probably mailed a paper application to college. You put it in the mail, and that was it. You were done. There was nothing for you to do. If you were like me and sent along some very mediocre photography, I actually had like a manila envelope, but perhaps you sent yours in with a business envelope, and that was it. It was done. And that is not how it works anymore. And I'm seeing more and more and more. I used to tell kids, you have to monitor your portal to ensure that your file is complete. If your file is incomplete, it is on you. And in the spring, if you say, where's my decision? And they say, your file was incomplete, we don't have a decision for you. So a complete file has an application, letters of recommendation, transcript, possibly and likely test scores, and that all has to arrive electronically to your application. And you can see them arrive in your portal. So when you apply, the school sends you a link, you establish an application portal for pretty much every school that you apply to, and you can see that, okay, my scores are there, okay, my file, and it will say at some point, file is complete. But it behooves every student to really monitor that. Wires can get crossed, names can cross. I've seen twin siblings files get, twisted around. So you really have to monitor. I've always said to kids, you have to monitor. But the thing that I'm seeing more and more of in the past couple of years is once you apply, more tasks appear in the portal. It's like, there's schools that you don't have a supplement. You think, great, I'm applying to this school. They don't have a supplement. And then you send in your application and they send you the link to the portal and you go in there and there's supplemental writing. There's tasks that they want done, stuff run honors colleges. So more and more, and this year, I think what I'm going to have to do, I tell kids, I email them, I think I'm really going to like call every parent this year and say, more than ever, you've got to stay on top of this because they might be asking you to do more things. And that day when you, like if you're me, mailed it in and that was it, you were done. You were just in a waiting game. That's over. So I will say one last thing about stress. If you know a senior, this is stressful, and they have been, if they're in a high school, going to school every day, this is what the conversation's about. Are they going to get in? This is never going to be fair or logical, and really to take a long view. And it's hard for a parent not to be stressed too. But if you can take the long view and say at this point and say, hey, what's done is done. Your curriculum and your grades are sort of baked in. You're going to be good. Taking the longer view, maybe you get into school, maybe you don't, but taking the long view. And I will share one last little story before I go into my stuff about lending. I have such a soft spot for the University of Maine. When my oldest child applied to college, University of Maine was on the list. He hadn't seen it, but we just thought it might be a good fit, and we sent out an application. I'm using the we, and I tell parents you can't use we, and I'm saying we. He sent University of Maine an application, and I had never sat at this seat as a parent, and sometime in late October, like a little package arrived from the University of Maine. And I didn't even know what it was. I left it for him. And I heard him, I was upstairs in my room, and I heard him yelling, "Mom, Mom." And I opened my bedroom door, and he was halfway up the stairs. His eyes were spinning. And he said, "I got into college." University of Maine had accepted him in October with like a little water bottle and some stickers. It was the best. And I could see, I mean, of course, this kid was going to go to college. Like, if you're on this webinar, your kid's going to probably go to college. Of course, he was going to go, but he didn't know it. And the stress boil that was punctured was just amazing. So I share that more to just say, you know, your kid's going to go to college somewhere, but maybe they don't. So it's a very stressful thing right now. It can be a very stressful thing. All right, there wasn't a whole lot of news and notes, and that's good because, you know, usually there's just too much going on, and trying to keep track of it as a parent is just too much. But I'm going to shift now to the ins and outs of loans and what do they look like. And I shout out to a parent who sent me an article about this and said, "Hey, maybe this would be good for webinar." I'm like, you know what? The article that I was sent was about what happens if there's a death involved, like, do student loans transfer or not? But I thought this would be a great way to walk through. When you come to this threshold, what does lending look like? There are basically 3 types of student loans that a student can take. And the first one is the Stafford. The Stafford loan is, you fill out the FAFSA, to get that, it is from the federal government. You can borrow freshman and sophomore year, $5,500. You can borrow junior and senior year, $7,500 each year, for a total of $26,000. These numbers have not changed in a long, long time. So borrowing $26,000 used to really maybe be a lot more helpful than it is now. These loans can come to you either subsidized or unsubsidized. If you generate need, subsidized loans will not accrue interest through the student's college career, and they are due to start payments 6 months after graduation, and that's when the interest would begin. They have an origination fee of 1.057%. They are a fixed rate at 2.05% above the 10-year treasury, and this year that makes the interest rate 5.5%. So if you take out a loan, it is going to be 5.5% fixed. The thing you need to know is, if you are not subsidized, if these loans are going to start to accrue interest right away, the interest would probably push the total to about closer to $30,000 when you go to start repaying 6 months after you graduate. So that's a Stafford loan. Now, the next loan is the Parent Plus, and this is also through the federal government. And the Parent Plus loan, you can borrow up to the cost of attendance minus other financial aid. So if you want to talk about 4-year numbers, if your costs after financial aid are $200,000 for 4 years, you can, in theory, borrow it all from the Parent Plus loan. Interest starts accruing immediately, and payments start immediately unless you get a deferment. The origination fee is 4.228%. The fixed rate loan this year, it's I think they said, well, I forget the exact calculation. I think it's 4% over the 10-year treasury, something like that. But this year's fixed rate is 9.08%. So that's, you know, a 4% origination fee and 9% right out of the gate. There's no, you're going to start paying that, the interest on the loan right away. It's a lot. You have to qualify for this every year, and you cannot have an adverse credit history. So it's a little vague. You don't have to qualify, like maybe you'd have to qualify for a mortgage, like how much money do you make? You can borrow this amount, but you can't have an adverse credit history. So this is one that I think that it could really put parents in a really slippery slope if they just say, "Okay, great, I'm going to borrow it all." You hear about like parents that earn $40,000 or $50,000 being told, in their financial aid package, part of your financial aid package is $40,000 a year in parent loans. Like, how is somebody going to pay that back? I don't know. I mean, I think parent loans can be a slippery slope if you're not very strategic about how to use them. Um, because again, it's a 4% origination fee and you're instantly in on 9%. Also, if you're planning on using this every year, you have to qualify every year. And if your credit has something adverse, you could find yourself not being able to borrow, and how's your kid going to go back to school? So these require, I think, some thought about how you're going to approach them. The other piece of the puzzle is private loans. Private loans can come through a bank or a credit union. The student borrows and somebody else co-signs that loan. So the student's borrowing, co-signer needs a credit check. The payments are due right away on a private loan unless unless a deferral is requested. Interest rates are variable. They tend to not have origination fees, and there tend to be limits around cost of attendance and a max of between $75,000 and $120,000 over the life of a student's undergraduate degree. So those are the three ways to borrow money. The Stafford loan, which is fairly limited in what it can provide. Parent loans, which could be, to the end of the earth. I was talking to a parent, they said, well, we borrowed $300,000 for 2 kids to go to college. And I was like, wow, that's, a lot of interest you're paying just to keep the loan current. And then private loans. So the interesting thing about this, that the parent that originally sent me the article, was what happens if the parent dies or the student dies. And this is where it gets a little something to pay attention to anyway. Stafford loans would be retired if the student were to die, either in college or after. They are dismissed. Parent loans, the plus loan, would be discharged if either the parent dies or the student dies. So private loans are where it becomes a little bit harder to get a death discharge. If a student who is really the core borrower were to die, the cosigner might be responsible for the loans. If the cosigner dies, the private loan could potentially call the loan. So that becomes a little bit that could be just a bit of a difficult situation if someone that is co-signed suddenly has these loans handed to them. The last thing I will talk about, and as you approach this, discharge is almost impossible. Right now, and this could change maybe, but right now, to get any sort of student loan discharge through bankruptcy is almost impossible. So these loans stay with you, and you hear about people having their Social Security check garnished because of unpaid student loans. The last thing to know, there's a lot of articles and there's a lot of, there's the option to do income-based repayment plans that potentially expire the loans at some point. And the other one is loan forgiveness if you go into the public sector in some capacity. These are good options. I mean, they can work, but you have to read the fine print very, very carefully to make those work. And you have to cross a lot of T's and dot a lot of I's. And I've heard people thought they did everything and they didn't, and it didn't work. So discharge is extremely difficult. Loan forgiveness and income-based repayment can work. So I just thought that was useful information to share. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And we'll be back, I guess the beginning of October. Okay, have a great rest of the weekend.